When I play up game and then talk, I'm trying, Jennifer.
What is up, Rip City? It's Fowad. Unfortunately, Sean and Alex are not able to be here tonight, so I'm going to do a solo for today. I'll try to keep it short and sweet, but I wanted to get the episode out anyways because we're about to publish our monthly report for the post-game surveys that we've been doing. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit on the podcast, and then also that should be posted sometime. Well, for you guys, it'll be today. On Wednesday, December 4th, it should be posted. Maybe not by the time this episode comes out, but sometime in the morning you should see that up. But yeah, I want to talk about that and then a couple other things. Right now, currently, it's halftime for the Clippers game, the NBA Cup game. It seems like we won't advance unless we win by, I think it's 56, 55 that we have to win by. 50 actually, I think exactly 50 we have to win by to get into the next round, which is not happening. We're down 5 right now, so it's not like we'll lose, but it's we have our work cut out for us, and it's looking like Dallas is gonna advance through the wild card spot instead of us, but it's fine. I'm weirdly more invested in this NBA Cup than I thought I would be. Like I wasn't opposed to it like some people were, because I was like, why not try something new to make people more excited about the regular season? But I was like, I don't know how excited I will be. Like for the in-season tournament when that was proposed, I was 100% in favor. For this one, I was like, I'll keep an open mind, and I'm actually liking it. I think it's, they're artificially creating interest in regular season games, which I personally am always interested anyways, but for a lot of people that are not interested, I think it should help, because even if it has no meaning, the trophy doesn't mean anything. It just seems like players are playing a little bit harder, so that's fun to see. And it's just one other additional thing to root for in the middle of a long regular season. It's just like, at least you have something to look forward to, and I think that's nice to see as well. And then obviously I think the teams that do well in it are obviously more invested in it too. So I think I'm more, yeah, that's pretty much what I had to say about it. I'm more invested than I thought I would be. I didn't expect to feel this bummed out that we're not going to advance, but it is what it is. We had an easy division and we did pretty well. If only we had won the first Houston game instead of the second one, we would have advanced. If we pulled off the, if we won the Kings game by a little bit more, that might have helped us as well. But unfortunately, it is what it is. But let's talk about the main reason why I'm here tonight, the rating surveys that we've been putting out after every single game this season. We wanted to put out a summary report type of thing to show how, what trends we saw over the month. We kind of combined October and November into this one, so it's a little bit longer than most months will be. But yeah, let's just get into it. So the highest rating of the month, this one is actually, for some reason, it's more complicated than I thought it would be. I thought it's a simple, whoever has the highest average would win this award, if you want to call it that. But the highest average technically was Robert Williams at a 6.77. But he only played, I think it was 8 games, and I felt like if you only played 8 out of 20 games, are you really eligible to be, the best scorer of the season? Or sorry, of the month? And I was like, you know what? I don't think that's fair. So let's give it to the next highest, or the next highest who has played at least half. And then it was very close between Tumani and Shaden. Like every game, the last 3 or 4, I was keeping an eye on it. It just kept going back and forth. One day it was Shaden, one day it was Tumani. And then it was also concerned with Shade because he only played, I think, by the end of the month, he had played 12 out of the 20, which is more than half, but it still felt a little bit low. But I was like, you know what, it's exactly 60%. Let's allow him, let's count him, let's make him eligible. Even though I think for NBA awards, you need to play like 65 games out of 82, which is like 70%, or I think it's higher than 70%, but for some I think some categories it's 70%. Um, so yeah, I don't know. Maybe for the future months I'll do 70%, but for now, I was like 60%. If you play 60% of the games in that month, you're eligible, and Shaden met that cutoff, so it's fine. And then here's where it gets interesting. So between him and Tumani, they both averaged a score of 6.39. But if you break it down to the third digit onwards, or sorry, I'll even give you the fourth digit. So Tumani scored 6.3884. Shaden scored 6.3856. So a difference of about 0.003 is what set them apart. But ultimately, Tumani did get the highest score of the month, the highest monthly average as we have it listed. Again, if you round it, it's 6.39, just barely ahead of Shaden Sharp. So it's very fun to see. I think it's very deserved. Tumani has been really good right from the start of the season. He's been arguably our best player according to this metric. If you want to give it any value, he was our best player. So it's really nice to see that his consistent high effort is paying off in some form. But yeah, that's about what I had to say about for Tumani. Robert Williams, again, 6.77. Technically, he was the highest, but he only played 7 or 8 games, so I thought it wasn't fair. And then now I'll talk about some other interesting trends that I noticed between the players going through each of their graphs. So I think one of the most interesting is Denny Avdia, who I want to talk about a little bit in more depth anyways. But his is probably the only graph that is it's a very clear upwards trend, except for this one big dip in the Memphis game where we lost by 45 and no one played well. It's just almost every single game is just going up and up and up. He started off the season with an MVP, or game ball as we're calling it now. But other than that, he hadn't won a single one for a while, until the end of the month, where he won 3 of the last 4 of November, and he's already won 1 in December, and he's honestly playing the best right now against the Clippers. So if he wins this one too, I wouldn't be surprised. That would make it 5 out of the last 6, which is crazy. I've notably been not the biggest fan of the Denny Avdia trade. I thought his shooting last year wasn't that I wasn't sure that it would carry into this year, and the start of the year it looked like it hadn't, but the last 10ish games he's been shooting it really well. He's been attacking the rim. His finishing has become a little bit better as well. His decision making has always been great, but it looks even better now that he's actually scoring when he chooses to take the shot as well. So yeah, he's been fantastic the last few games. 100% credit to him, and I'll own that I wasn't the biggest fan of him, but he's proving me wrong 100%. So that was exciting to see that you can see that clear upwards trend, and something that I really like about these graphs, it's kind of reflecting and it's validating the way we felt about some of these players. It's like if someone's really up and down, you can see that he actually was up and down that month. So it kind of reminds you of how you felt at some of those times, and it gives you, I guess it's less recency bias, because you can look back at how they played. But anyways, another interesting one I saw was Anthony Simons. His is just, it's all over the place. It's like if you're looking at the graph, you can see that we have a red, gray, and blue zone for hot and cold and neutral. He has like one, or he has I think 2 actually in the neutral zone. The rest of them either cold or hot, and it looked like a lot of them are just alternating every game. And he goes from like 2 games in the blue, jumps to red, back to blue. It's just a complete zigzag all the way, and then until he had a couple bad games in a row, and then he got hurt, and then he came back again. The zigzag continued, but now that if you look at the first December game as well, he's had 4 out of 5 good games in his last few, and that's been encouraging to see. Hopefully he continues. Today has not been great, unfortunately, so he looks like he's back on the cold end, but generally I think he's trending towards a better player, or more like how he was the last few years. But that still remains to be seen. I think Alex will tell you right now he still wouldn't be a fan of him. He wants Simons traded. I still want Simons traded, even though he's had a few good games now. But it's not. I don't know. Let's see it. Let's see if he continues playing well. But if I'm not too optimistic currently. His monthly average came out to 5.83, which is higher than you'd think. Is just below an average, which we have set as 6. So 5.8 doesn't seem that low, but I think it's carried by a few of those higher scores. Um, he's also one of the only players who hasn't won a game ball yet. Actually, let's talk about that. I just talked about Denny. He had 4 MVPs in the month, which is the highest out of any players. Second highest was Robert Williams at 3, and then a bunch of players had 2. The only players who hadn't won any are Duop Reith, who's not in the rotation, Chris Murray, who's in and out of the rotation, Jabari Walker, who's in and out of the rotation, and then you have Aiden and Ant. Those are the only 2 really rotation players that haven't won one yet. Everyone's even won 2, and they haven't won a single one, so that's a little bit surprising. Or maybe it's not surprising because they've gotten a lot of criticism for their play. So I guess it makes sense that they have not won our surveys because they haven't played well enough to deserve it. But yeah, Denny had 4, Robert Williams had 3, Anthony had 0. Now let's move on to another one that I found interesting, which is sorry, just 1 second. Donovan Clingan as well. Okay, so Donovan Clingan, Scoot Henderson, and Jeremy Grant. These are 3 people who are, let's call it, I mean, they are the most consistent, which is surprising because you think that these are, or maybe not Clingan, but Scoot and Jeremy seem to be some of the most inconsistent players. But they actually, so what we did for consistency is I just took the standard deviation of everyone's scores, which I think is probably the best way to do it to see everyone's variance. And then I took out the non-rotation players, Duop, Jabari, Ryan, and Chris Murray. Then the lowest score, which means they had the least deviation on a game-to-game basis, was Jeremy Grant, which at face value, it might be a little bit surprising, but if you look at his scores and if you even think about it, he has been very consistent. It's just that consistent score hasn't been the best. His monthly average is a 5.73, which makes sense because he's been like probably just around average, maybe slightly below average in every single game. If you look at his graph, there's only one that's really in the blue. There's a bunch that are like right on the edge of blue, but only one that's in blue, 3 that are in red. So almost all of his scores are in that gray area, which is 5 to 7. So it makes sense that he's one of the most consistent. Same thing with Clingan. Clingan, he had a couple in the blue, and he had that one really, really good game in the red. But generally, all of his are in the gray. Scoot is a little bit more surprising. Oh, sorry. Donovan's average was a 6.08. And then Scoot's is a little bit surprising because even his graph doesn't look that consistent. Because there's a couple games where he'll dip pretty deep down into the blue. And then he has a couple reds as well. So it doesn't look the most consistent, but I guess it was because most of them are still in the gray. And it's just 1 or 2 that are really off, even though they are like deep into the blue. But Scoot actually had the second lowest standard deviation. So supposedly he's the second most consistent. Yeah, and then Tumani, which most people would expect to be the most consistent, and his graph honestly does look that way. But he was actually 4th. He's 4th, and it's kind of, I feel like it's not fair because some of his variation comes from he has really high games. He has like 4 games in a row where he scored above an 8, and then the rest of them are kind of like in the 6 to 7 range. So I think that might have been where it came from, but yeah, he's definitely consistent, just not the most consistent. Denny also is the next highest, but I think because of his early start to the season, his score is not that low. But if I was to look at maybe the last 10 games, I think he would definitely be probably the most consistent player. And then least consistent, I think it's not a surprise at all, but it's Anthony Simons. He has a huge variation, like I talked about, game to game. It's all over the place, which is honestly maybe even a little bit surprising because I felt like he's been consistently bad. But I think because of the last few games of the month, where he did have a few good games, I think that's probably what's creating even more variation rather than just being consistently low. Um, and then the last thing I wanted to talk about in terms of these graphs, the highest score of the month. So let's start off in a sorry, what's the word? In a continuity chronological. There we go. Let's start off chronologically. So very early on in the season, you guys will remember there was a game where Ryan Rupert came into the game. He popped off and he had a good game. And then the next game, he came again and he had a really good game. That was our highest. Oh no, sorry, that was still not our highest, but that was our second highest score. And I thought that maybe that was going to be one of the highest. If he continued playing that way, he scored he scored an 8.0 that game. And then 2 games later, that was when Delano Banton came out. And then Delano Banton had a 9.6, which I thought is a crazy score, and I didn't think anyone would top that maybe the rest of the season, let alone this month. But it turns out a few games after that, there was someone who had a really high score, and that was Donovan Clingan against Minnesota in the second game. Sorry, the third game overall, but the second time we beat them, which I don't think that was the cup game, but we still had a great game. He had a 9.86, which on our graph we rounded to a 9.9. That was the highest score of the season, so far, of the month. I don't think anyone will top it in the rest of the season. I don't see anyone scoring higher than a 9.86. That's ridiculous. I don't even know what it would take. But shout out to Donovan Clingan for that amazing score. A couple other nines. Shaden Sharp had 2 games above a 9. He's actually the only one to do that. Delano Banton has 1 above 9. Robert Williams has 1 above 9. Donovan Clingan, like we talked about. Denny Avdia has 1 at 8.9697, which on our graph we counted as a 9, but sure, let's count him. He has 1 9 above a 9 as well. And yeah, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about with the graphs. I guess, sure, one last thing. We've only talked about the players, but let's talk about some of these team ratings. The highest team rating actually came last game, which was the first game of December. So let's not talk about that. But the highest game in October, November was the first Minnesota game, which our offensive score was at 8.46. And that was the highest by a decent margin, which is not that surprising because our offense has been pretty bad all season. So that was one of the few games where we had a really good score. I think that's actually the only one above an 8. Yeah, it is the only one above an 8. Then our defense, we've had a couple. I'm counting 3 games above an 8, 1 above a 9. And then one of the more interesting ones to me, it'll be more interesting the later we go on into the season, but the fan game score or game rating, which we renamed it to, those 2 Minnesota games, those were the highest, followed by the Hawks one. Those 3 were all above 8.6, 8.7. One of them was a 9.2. So that stretch of the season, and I think most people, if you think back to how you were feeling at the time, after those 3 games, that was probably the highest high we've had all season. So it makes sense. It kind of reflects that was the highest of the season. And then one last thing I forgot to talk about. Sorry, I keep saying one last thing. The coach's performance. So it'll be on the last slide of our post. But Chauncey didn't score above a 6 until the 8th game of the season, and he only had 1 game above a 6 for the first 11 games. But since those 11 games, he's actually been scoring above a 6 pretty often. I think that's fair because we have been playing better. We are, I want to say, 5-5 in our last 10 games, and we're, other than the Houston game where we got blown out, there hasn't really been a game where it looked like we played really bad. We did lose by 25 to Memphis again, but we were missing like half our rotation for that game, and we still kept it close for like 2.5 quarters, so I'll give us a pass for that. And then, sorry. Moving on, the last thing I really want to talk about, moving on from the graphics and the monthly summary, we put out a post a couple days ago. Actually, we put out one a couple weeks ago about Delano Banton having the highest net rating in the league. And a lot of people said that net rating can be a little bit flawed. It's very early in the season. He had only played, I think, like 10 games at the time. So it was understandable that some people said it's a small sample size. So uh, it's not anything to give any value to. Or sorry, he didn't have the highest in the league. He had the highest on the team, and I think fourth highest in the league at the time. Um, but now we're 20 games in, 21 now, and he still has the highest rating on the team. He's no longer the highest, or sorry, he's no longer top five in the league, but he is still the highest on the team by a very wide margin. I think after last game, so after the first game of December, he's at a 9.2. And the next highest on the team is Kamara with a minus 5.7. So that means so that means the team is 9 points better per 100 possessions when he's playing, which some people might find it surprising. I personally don't. I think he's been amazing. He brings a lot of energy and he brings a different, unique play style when he comes into the game, and I think that energy always results in us going on a run or withstanding a run or just scoring in one way or another. He's really good at attacking the rim. He gets there easily. There's some games where his finishing isn't the best, but generally I think he's been a pretty good finisher. So that was not very surprising to me, but I thought other people might find it surprising, so I did share it. Uh, Delano Banton with the highest net rating on the team, but then people still had some concerns that, okay, sure, but net rating isn't the best metric. There's a lot of garbage time in there, and there's a couple other issues with it as well. So then I went to cleaningtheglass.com, which is an NBA advanced stats website. And generally, I don't love advanced stats anyways. I'm more of an eye test guy, but my eye test saw that he was playing well, so that's why I looked this up. And sorry, I don't have this open on me right now, so I don't have the most updated score. But as of the time I posted it, which I think was 2 games ago, he had Delano Delano Banton had not only the highest score on our team there as well. He had the second highest on-off rating in the league after Jokic, and it was like neck and neck, like plus 30.5 for Jokic, I believe, and plus 30.2 for Delano. So that means we're 30 points better with him on the court than with him off the court. So I think like this is he's shown that he's a good rotation player in my opinion, and I think he should be a part of our team moving forward. I think his future, he's not probably not going to be an all-star. I hope he proves me wrong, but I do think he can be a core part of our rotation for the next few years. His shot has been good. He brings a lot of energy off the bench, like I said. He pushes the pace, and even if he's not the one scoring, I think pushing the pace helps create opportunities for other players as well. Denny does a lot of the same things, but having two of those guys off the bench is, I think, it's really tough for teams to deal with, and it's also one of the reasons why I actually do want to keep Denny off the bench and not start him over either Tumani or Jeremy or whatever people want. I think it's better. We can close with him if he's having a good game, which he usually is. But I think having him and Denny and Delano, or Delaney as I've been calling them, off the bench, I think that's a really good attack that we have. And they're, them going against the bench units in the first half, I think helps us stay in games a lot of the time and cut back some of those deficits. If we are, if we are losing, they help tie it up. They go on a run. So I think that's been a good. Sorry, I need to take a break, but that's been a good. I'm not used to talking this long. That's been a. So Denny and Delano off the bench have been a good tandem, and I think I'd like to see that keep going. And I would love to re-sign Delano at the end of the season. I think he could be a Blazer for a long time. Unfortunately, we can't extend him, and I think we can only offer him like 13 million a year or something like that. But I think that's around what he's worth anyway, so I don't see a team offering too much more than that. So I think we should be able to keep him financially. But yeah, I just want to give him another shout out because I just love his game. Even today, he's having a good game. He has 8 points in well, now 10 minutes, but I think he scored those 8 in like a span of like 5 minutes. So in that first half, he brought a big boost off the bench as well. So, anyways, I think that's about where I'll leave it. My mouth is getting dry. I don't have my co-host with me today, so I had to solo this one. I wasn't used to talking this long. Um, but yeah, to sum it up, check out our monthly reports. They are posted on Reddit, Instagram at Unbiased Trailblazers, Twitter at Unbiased Blazers, and I think that's pretty much everywhere it's posted. So follow us on there, check us out on Reddit, and yeah, as always, Rip City baby.